ونضع الموازين القسط ليوم القيامة فلا تظلم نفس شيئا وإن كان مثقال حبة من خردل أتينا بها وكفى بنا حاسبين رب اشرح لي صدري ويسر لي أمري واحلل عقدة من لساني يفقه قولي فالحمد لله والصلاة والسلام على رسول الله وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين ثم أما بعد. We're on ayah number 47. وَنَضَعُ الْمَوَازِينَ الْقِسْطِ. Right after Allah mentions the punishment or even the slightest bit of punishment, Allah mentions how does someone end up in punishment. We place the truly just scales. Al-qist in Arabic is an infinitive. It's a masdar, it's called a masdar, an idea. But here it's being used as an adjective. Al-mawazin al-qist. And for Arabic students, you know, when you see mawazin, which is a broken plural, it's jama' mukassar or jama' taksir, it expects a feminine adjective. But a masdar can be an adjective to anything. Mufrad, muthanna, jama' mukassar, doesn't matter. It doesn't change. So that's why al-qist is used, not qistah. There's no such thing. Okay. Anyhow, the point I want to make for the rest of you is al-qist being used as an adjective, like justice being used as an adjective. The scales, as opposed to saying the just scales, the fair scales, it's like Allah is calling them the fairness scales, the justice scales. And the difference between the two is when you describe something with an infinitive, with the idea itself, it is as though you're saying you're never going to find more justice than these scales. It is justice itself. These scales are justice itself. Not just that they're fair, but they represent fairness itself. لِيَوْمِ الْقِيَامَةِ. For the day of resurrection. فَلَا تُظْلَمُ نَفْسٌ شَيْئًا. Then no individual is going to be harmed in any way, or no individual is going to be done wrong, mistreated in any way, shape or form. وَإِنْ كَانَ مِثْقَالَ حَبَّةٍ مِّنْ خَرْدَلٍ أَتَيْنَا بِهَا. And even if there was the weight of a mustard seed, Urdu mein kehte hain rai ka dana. Rai ka dana. If it's that much, أَتَيْنَا بِهَا, we would bring it forward. In other words, the evidence will come out. وَكَفَى بِنَا حَاسِبِينَ. And we by ourselves are enough to take the account. So even a Muslim shouldn't think, well, you know, these angels, they're doing all the work. Allah says, we by ourselves are enough. I have all the knowledge and all the account myself too. The question arises, and why the angels, why the scrolls, why this writing of the deeds and all this other stuff? If Allah has everything in His knowledge, that's for us, not for Him. You know, philosophically speaking, if Allah is ultimately fair, we don't even have to have a day of judgment. We could just go straight to heaven or straight to hell. Why even have the entire proceeding and all the deeds being counted and all of this other stuff? Why? Because justice doesn't just need to be done. It should be perceived to have been done. There's a difference between the execution of justice and the perception of justice. The execution of justice is a judge made a fair decision, done. The perception of justice is nobody, you know, like you ever heard of secret trials? Right? If you have a secret trial, what's the assumption by most people? Was it a fair or unfair trial? It's unfair because it's secret. So if Allah's judgment is done in secret, the people might have an argument to say, oh, I don't know how He judged me. I mean, He put me in hell, but I thought I did pretty good. If you have judgment day, before you have the day of judgment, what's clear to everybody? This is what I earned. I saw it with my own self. I admitted to it. My hands testified. My ears testified. My eyes testified. There's no excuse left. You can't, you know how sometimes the teacher gives you a grade and you look at your grade and say, no, that can't be my grade. Let me see my exam. He didn't give you your exam. He just gave you your grade, right? And you're like, how did I get this? I thought I was going to 95. How did I get an 85? Can you show me the test? Maybe you made a mistake in grading. But if He shows you the test, and He shows you that He graded you correctly and you realize all of your mistakes, then you're satisfied with the result. You can't complain about the result anymore, right? So the judgment day, the scales being established, and they being ultimately fair, all of that is so we have no room for excuses. Because the day of judgment is not just for believers, it's also for disbelievers. And the believer has trust in Allah, but the disbeliever doesn't have trust in Allah. So he has to see, this is what I earned. This is exactly what I got. وَلَقَدْ آتَيْنَا مُوسَى وَهَارُونَ الْفُرْقَانِ. We go back to normal sequence. The abnormal sequence was once, Harun and Musa. That's the story special to Harun alayhi salam, Surah Taha. And we saw a few special features about him. Now we're back to the typical sequence in the Quran, where Musa is mentioned first and Harun is mentioned second, alayhim as-salam. And we gave Musa and Harun the means to divide, al-Furqan. Furqan means the rough English translation or the hard English translation you guys have is criterion, right, or distinguisher. But Furqan comes from farq. Farq means to separate. And the alif nun at the end of Furqan makes it hyperbolized, the extremely powerful separator, the one who clearly separates right from wrong. We gave Musa and Harun revelation that made it abundantly clear what right is and what wrong is. This is important to mention, especially after the accounts of the previous surah, because when they fell into shirk, it's not like they weren't clear about what tawheed is or isn't. They already had Furqan, وَضِيَاءً, and they had light. Now there are two words in Arabic for light. There's nur and there's diya. Diya and nur. Like we have an imam whose name is Diya, right? So diya is actually warm light. Like the sunlight is diya. And moonlight can also be called nur, but nur is actually cool. It doesn't have heat in it. The light that can have discomfort in it or toughness in it is diya. And the use of the word diya perhaps suggests that the sharia of Musa and Harun, the sharia that was given to them, the law that was given to them, was tougher than the one we are given. It was diya as opposed to nur. So it was harder. And actually some of the provisions in that law were relaxed in Islam. Some of the things that were tougher on them were actually relaxed in Islam. You know? And Allah Azza wa Jalla even describes this, like لِيَضَعَ عَنْهُمْ إِسْرَهُمْ وَالْأَغْلَالَ الَّتِي كَانَتْ عَلَيْهِمْ الْإِسْرَ وَالْأَغْلَالِ, to remove from them the shackles and chains that used to be on them. In other words, there were some tough laws that Allah gave to them too, but Allah removed them and made Islam easier for us. They had to worship the entire day of Saturday, no business. We just have Friday prayer, go back to work, enjoy yourself. وَانْتَشِرُوا فِي الْأَرْضِ, get out of here, go, have fun. وَابْتَغُوا مِنْ فَضْلِ اللَّهِ, go pursue from Allah's favor. That's an ease, that's a relaxation Allah Azza wa Jalla gave us, among other things. So ضِيَاءً وَذِكْرًا لِلْمُتَّقِينَ, and as a reminder for those who have taqwa. And this is also important. Usually people think of religious revelation, like Torah, Injil, Quran even, they think of it as laws. Right? There's just instructions, do this and don't do this. Allah says it's not just laws and instructions, it's a reminder. And a reminder is like, I'll give you a modern example. When you set up your app to go off at a certain hour, your alarm clock on your phone, right? It's a constant, it's not a one-time thing, it's every day, it's every few minutes, etc. A reminder means something that you engage with regularly. Law, you can know the law once. Stop at a red light. You don't have to study the law book for traffic every day. You just study it when you're forced to take that test that you don't remember. That's it. Law is law, and it's done. But reminder is something you need all the time. You need to be reminded to wake up. So you have your alarm clock. You have your calendar. You have the alerts that pop up on your schedule thingamajig, whatever app you use or program you use, calendar you use, right? Or you mark it on your calendar at home. This is reminder. So the revelation is supposed to be a distinguisher between right and wrong. It's supposed to be clear as day so that you can walk clearly, you can know your way, and it's supposed to be a constant reminder for people who have taqwa. Also in it there's a nice clue. People who get reminder from revelation constantly reinforce their taqwa. They get their taqwa because they're constantly being reminded through revelation. الَّذِينَ يَخْشَوْنَ رَبَّهُمْ, those who truly feared, were overwhelmed in fear of their master, بِالْغَيْبِ, the master who's in the unseen. Also the unseen here could mean they are in the unseen. They don't just show that they're afraid of Allah in public, they're also afraid of Allah when nobody else is watching. They're afraid of Allah in the unseen from others. وَهُمْ مِنَ السَّاعَةِ مُشْفِقُونَ, and when it comes to about the hour, especially about the hour, they are terrified. They're overwhelmed with fear, ishfaq. To be overwhelmed with fear. Actually, from the lugha of Abdad also, the language of opposites. Shafiq is someone extremely merciful that removes your fears. And mushfiq is someone who can instill fear in you or you're terribly afraid. وَهَذَا ذِكْرٌ مُبَارَكٌ, and this is a blessed mention. This is a blessed reminder. This is a description of the Quran. A reminder full of barakah. Not only are you getting reminded, the fact that you're getting reminded, the words of the Quran that are coming out of your mouth, each letter is giving you 10 good deeds. And the environment in which you are is now surrounded by angels. Goodness will come out of this gathering more than you could ever expect. Way beyond just the listening of some words. ذِكْرٌ مُبَارَكٌ أَنزَلْنَاهُ, we've sent it down. فَأَنْتُمْ لَهُ مُنْكِرُونَ, then you're going to be in denial of it? You're going to reject it altogether? Now also what we learn from this is the recitation of Quran and remembering Allah through the Quran, it brings about good things in life that you didn't even expect. Barakah is contagious. It's more goodness than is expected. الزِّيَادَةُ فِي الْخَيْرِ فَوْقَ التَّوَقُّعِ, above expectation. When you have goodness, that's called barakah. So you're just sitting home reciting Quran and all of a sudden the interview went through, or that proposal that came in, got approved or got rejected because you found out the guy's messed up or something. Something good came your way because of the barakah of the Quran. So just having a Quran lifestyle, it brings a lot of good in your life, beyond even the remembrance. وَلَقَدْ آتَيْنَا إِبْرَاهِيمَ رُشْدَهُ مِنْ قَبْلِ. So awesome, Allah says this. He says, we had already given Ibrahim alayhi salam his upright character way back. Even before revelation, even before all of that, Allah had given him an upright, sharp mind. وَكُنَّا بِهِ عَالِمِينَ. And we had full knowledge of what he was up to. We had full knowledge of what he was doing. This is important to mention before we get into the story of Ibrahim alayhi salam, because he did something that we're not allowed to do. And actually did a whole bunch of things we're not allowed to do. He attempted to slaughter his child. Well, that's kind of illegal in Islam. He left his family in the middle of what would otherwise be certain death. Can't do that to your family in Islam. Say, I'm following the Sunnah of Ibrahim. So I took him out to, the Mojave Desert. I came back from Phoenix Airport. Like, you can't do that. Sunnah of Ibrahim. No. He broke a bunch of idols, so you can't sneak into a Hindu temple at night. And by the way, I was in what town was that? It's in Minnesota. Or what's that? Duluth, Minnesota. Duluth, Minnesota. Really beautiful city. Small town by the water. Anyway, small Muslim community. Jum'ah khutbah was 12 people. It was awesome. But I met a brother there, Malaysian fellow. We had some really interesting conversations. And he told me that there was this extreme cultish movement in Malaysia. This guy gave a khutbah and said, we have to establish the Sunnah of Ibrahim, because a lot of Buddhists and Hindus are in Malaysia. And it's a majority Muslim population. He said, we have to establish the Sunnah of Ibrahim alayhi salam, we have to break the idols. Right? That's how we're going to teach the people. So a bunch of dumb young kids, like teenagers, they would sneak into Hindu temples, Buddhist temples in the night, and they would destroy the idols. One after the other. They were doing this kind of horrible, it's completely haram in Islam. But they're doing it based on the ayah of, the surah. And then the guy, the supposed imam who's saying this is quoting these ayat, and he's got dalil, And what does a teenager need except dalil? He hears an ayah and he's now all of a sudden the Grand Mufti of Malaysia, and he's going to go take his machete and go to work, And the Hindus found, it was a very tragic incident in Malaysia. From what he told me, if I can remember, it was in the 70s or 80s, something like that. And the Hindu community found out. And the extreme among them waited one night, and they started waiting out for them in not as open guards, but in ambush, kind of hiding out. And when these kids showed up to climb on top of the temple, they butchered them. They killed them. A bunch of Muslim teens died. And there were riots in the streets and all kinds of chaos, and Islam was blamed, and Ibrahim alayhi salam was blamed, etc. You have to understand, and I've even heard, I listened to NPR once in a while. As one time this female comic was on, and she's talking about Ibrahim alayhi salam. And he goes, I don't know, I was trying to read the Bible, figure it out for myself, but I'm really confused. Why would God make anybody kill their son? Anybody who does that in our community, our society, is a psychopathic criminal. Why do we idolize this man? And why is he jumping into a fire? Isn't that suicide? Why would he do that? Etc., etc. She's saying these things about Ibrahim alayhi salam. And yes, if you look at all of the things that Ibrahim alayhi salam was asked to do, we can't do any of them. And they're very hard to justify through logic. What kind of religion is this? But you have to understand the instructions and the tests given to prophets are way harder and way more difficult than the tests given to believers. And his tests were only legitimate because they were directly revealed to him. And number two, when revelation applies to someone other than a prophet, then the prophet goes out of his way to preach that message. A prophet never keeps a message to himself unless it's only for himself. You see? Our Prophet ﷺ, certain instructions are only for him. Qiyamul Layl, tahajjud prayer is mandatory for our Prophet ﷺ. He never, ever, ever commanded us, obligated us to pray tahajjud. He didn't do so. Actually, he went out of his way to make sure some of his practices that are exclusive to him don't become a mandatory part of religion, because that would make life hard on us. Ibrahim a.s. never goes around preaching, kill your sons. Allah will reward you, give you even better, etc., etc. He doesn't do that. This is specific instructions to him. But then also you have to understand, nobody would do that on their own. Like Ibrahim a.s. didn't just one day decide I should destroy the idols. Before Allah mentioned, that's the story that's coming, him destroying the idols. We're going to learn that this is not an idea he had of himself. This is something Allah inspired him to do for that particular community. That's something Allah instructed him to do. إِذْ قَالَ لِأَبِيهِ وَقَوْمِهِ. When he said to his father, some say his uncle, because ab can be a comprehensive term used for any elder, and they say his father couldn't have been a mushrik, etc., etc. Both views exist in our tradition. وَقَوْمِهِ, and his nation. مَا هَذِهِ التَّمَاثِيلِ الَّتِي أَنْتُمْ لَهَا عَاكِفُونَ. What are these representations that you guys sit in devotion in front of? He calls them tamathil. Tamthil is a representation. Meaning the people who do shirk, even they recognize this isn't what we worship, this represents something greater. Tamthil is a representation. Okay? So it represents something greater. That's why the idol itself isn't sacred. What it represents is sacred. That's what the higher teachers will tell you. Actually, even until today, the philosophers of the Hindu religion will tell you we don't worship the idols at all. That's just stone, and we worship the ideas behind them. They're not valuable to us at all. But you know what happens to the masses of people, right? The masses of people don't follow this philosophical understanding of Hinduism, which has God has no image, and He's beyond representation, and no pictures can capture Him, and there's only one God, etc. This is in Hindu philosophy too, higher up. But does that make its way down to the people? No. When you have something that can be misunderstood by a child, then the formula is it can be misunderstood by society. That's just a simple formula, especially in religious practices. If you have, for example, you wrote some poetry, and you wrote some poetry praising the Prophet ﷺ, which is fine, right? Poetry praising the Prophet ﷺ. But in your mind, you wrote the poetry as though you are depicting the Day of Judgment. And on the Day of Judgment, you are saying, who is going to help us if not you? Right? I mean, the Prophet ﷺ is going to do shafa'ah, and this person is imagining himself on the Day of Judgment and saying, everybody else has said no. You're the only one who can say yes. And he's imagining this scene and he's writing about it in poetry. This is what poets do, right? But in his mind, he's in the Day of Judgment and he's depicting this scene. When he has thousands of readers, you think everybody else is going to imagine that scene, or they're going to read it differently? So now when thousands of readers are reading about the Prophet ﷺ, who's going to help me except you? Does that become a problem? Does that become a theological problem? Sure. So you have to see, I'm not saying that author is wrong or the poetry is wrong. The poetry may be fine in its place. It may be. But if the community, the population, isn't mature enough to understand where this is coming from, then it shouldn't be popularized. As a matter of fact, the things that should be popularized, Allah already commanded us to popularize. بَلِّغُوا عَنِّي وَلَوْ آيَةً. The Prophet tells us, spread on my behalf even if it's an ayah. The ayah can't be taken the wrong way. It protects you from these things. And you're not going to find a better praise of Allah and a better praise of Muhammadur Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam than the Quran itself. Make Quran popular, then all of these things will have their place. But these things are now slowly becoming an alternative to the Quran. They're becoming an alternative to the actual praise of Allah. Like you have an obsession with nasheeds. I'm not a mufti. I'm not going to give a fatwa on nasheed artists. I don't know. But I just feel like it's replacing Quran. Like that same love and affection you're supposed to have for Allah's book. And then people say, well, I don't understand the Quran. It doesn't do anything for me. Is that Allah's problem or yours? That you should seek a substitute for that rather than work on yourself? And you really underestimate the Quran that much that it won't satisfy your spiritual needs? You really shortchanged what this... Hada dhikrun mubarak. What do you think this is? It's just Quran. It's not just Quran. It's the greatest message ever given. It's the book of Allah. It's the word revealed to Muhammadur Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. It's not a small thing. So we shouldn't underestimate its value in our own personal spiritual development. We shouldn't just take it for granted. Anyhow, Ibrahim says to his father and his nation, so he made it public. First he talked to dad about it. Dad wouldn't listen. So he goes out in the community and starts asking people, so what do you worship? This, it represents the rain. How does he represent the rain? How does he do that? This is the God of wealth. How is he the God of wealth? You just made him from like that wood yesterday. You just lost money making it. So how is he the God of wealth? Antum laha akifun. You're sitting here in concentration in front of it.